Um, so we have a record of what was presented here and what's going on. So anyway, and I'm going to go ahead and let Ed start from there. If you're
All right.
ready, Ed.
I'm ready. Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, we can hear you. We just need you to share
Okay.
your screen now.
I'm going to do that. Let me know when you have the galaxy background.
Okay. We have it.
Okay. So before we jump into Alaska, the North Star Bureau here, I'm going to establish a history of the pattern you're about to see. And it starts in our Nevada court case that's still ongoing since 2024 in the case of Andy Thompson versus the Secretary of State of Nevada. Okay. Now you have the same vendor, Dominion, and every time I look at a Dominion cast vote record, I always find this amazing pattern one way or another. Okay. And it's a prima facie proof of election fraud. There's no argument, there's no rebuttal, there's no dancing around it. Okay. So we're going to start here, and you're looking at state question 3 in Nevada in 2024. Say question 3 was to adopt open primaries in future elections and ranked choice voting. And there are two lines here, red and blue. Okay. The dark red is the cumulative percentage of how Trump voters voted on this proposition. And the dark blue line is the cumulative percentage of how Kamala voters voted on this proposition. We don't care about those cumulative lines. We care about the light red and the light blue lines, which is how Trump and Kamala voters voted on this proposition. And every consecutive batch of 13,000 ballots over a grand total of 443,000 mail-in ballots only. So there's no election day here. There's no early. We're just looking at the mail-in ballots only in the order in which they appear in the cast vote record. So I have 443,000 rows in Excel, and it tells me two things: how they voted for president, and on the same ballot, how they voted on this proposition. So the light red line, okay, this is the percentage of Trump voters that were opposed. So light red, which I call M, okay, is Trump and no. So I'm going to call that T no divided by T no plus TS. So it's the percentage of Trump voters that were opposed. The blue line, light blue, N is Kamala no over Kamala no plus Kamala yes. So it's what percentage of Kamala voters were opposed to this proposition. And we're looking at this over the course of the mail-in vote as it comes into central counting. Remember, this isn't when people voted. This is not when people voted. This is when their ballots arrived in bins from all over the county at central counting, and they got put through a scanner. And what we see here is that Kamala and Trump voters are perfectly synchronized in this election. So in the yellow regions are where Trump voters go up, and at the same time, so do Kamala voters by the exact same percentage. And the next batch of 13,000 ballots, Trump voters go down and Kamala voters go down. And in the next batch, Trump voters go up and Kamala voters go up. And then Trump voters go down and in fact, this happens for the first 85% of the election. That's 370,000 mail-in ballots. Then at the end of the mail-in vote, it fizzles out and the pattern stops. The next graph over here is the rates of change. So if I take how Trump voters voted here and I subtract it from the percentage here, then I do the same thing for the Kamala voters and I subtract it here. It's called the first derivative at a discrete level. We want to see what is the rate of change for Trump and Kamala voters between every pair of 13,000 consecutive ballots? Can anybody tell the difference? Now's the time for questions. If you don't understand what's
Well,
happening,
I've got everybody muted. And that's
is anybody raising their hand?
no, I don't see any hands raising. But then again, with you scary, blah, blah, if not, if I've got the not if I've got the waiting room here.
Okay, I'm going to continue.
Okay.
So, for anybody that thinks, oh, well, maybe this is a demographic or some weird thing, what I'm going to show you is the exact same graph for congressional districts. Okay. So the green line is, if I can get that picture to stand still, is how Trump voters oppose it in the rate of change in congressional district 1, and the white line is how Kamala voters oppose it in congressional district 3. Then over here we see district 3 versus 4 and yada yada. So even between congressional districts, Trump and Kamala voters in different congressional districts are changing their stance on this ballot proposition in perfect synchrony. So you're going to hear me say the word lockstep parallel motion quite often. And that's because the first derivatives are parallel at all times, and they're moving through time, because that's what a derivative is, something that moves through time. So that's what motion is. And they're in lockstep because they're not even out of phase. Their peaks and valleys are exact. So this phenomenon, the synchronization and the rates of change, is what I call lockstep parallel motion. So now, how do we know that this, again, so just showing you, the congressional districts doing the same thing. How do we actually prove scientifically that this can happen? And it's actually very, very easy. It's called a precinct preserved shuffle test. So this is a sample using only 20 ballots. Okay. And all we're going to do is say, listen, I have, this is the smallest election ever, right? 20 ballot election. Okay. And there's 4 precincts, A, B, C, and D. We're only going to shuffle ballots with other ballots from the same precinct. That's all we're going to do. So that way we preserve any authentic geographic or demographic trends that may have occurred in the data. That's all we're going to do. So when you're done with this precinct, so first over here, you sort them first by precinct from A to D. Okay. You just roll a random number. And then you shuffle by that random number, but only within each precinct block. Okay, so that's the precinct preserve shuffle test. And then you pop them back out into a shuffled cast vote record. So if we look at precinct D in purple, there's 1 Trump ballot, 1 Trump ballot, 1 Biden ballot, 1 Trump ballot. So that's a total of 3 Trump ballots and 1 Biden ballot. We should get the same thing in the shuffled version. 1 Trump, 2 Trump, 3 Trump, 1 Biden. So this is what a precinct preserved shuffle test is. No ballot is shuffled with any ballot that's not in its precinct. They're only shuffled with ballots in the same exact precinct. The only thing that changes is the internal order in which those ballots occurred for that precinct. But they're still mapped. Each precinct's ballots are still mapped to the same location in the cast vote record. Okay?
Edward, because that preserves the ballot that preserves as we go through the ballots from the beginning to the end, that preserves the order of the ballots, which is the time base.
Yes.
Okay, because the time base is like, if we deal with it like every ballot arriving is a tick of the clock. Okay, so that's when we talk about, that lockstep motion and derivatives in time. We're talking about the time base each tick of the clock of the time base is the next ballot coming into to be tabulated. So when we shuffle we actually are not we're shuffling the ballot measure really inside the precincts, still connected to the candidate.
Right. So that's the thing. When we shuffle the ballot, we shuffle the entire ballot, including how they voted on the proposition. So
Right.
we're not changing anything on these ballots. We're just saying I'm going to change the order in which they came in for that precinct only, while still mapping those each precinct's ballots to the same exact place on the county-wide sequence. Okay.
It's
So
kind of like it's kind of like shuffling a deck of cards.
Exactly.
The number of queens doesn't change. It's just the order in which the queens show up.
But say well, we take all the queens, we still wind up with the same number of queens in
Right,
each precinct.
right.
Okay, now what happens when we shuffle Nevada? Okay. And this happens in Alaska too when we see the exact same pattern. Here's the original election, okay, and a slightly more comprehensible, but with a little less flash to it. So brown is where it's ascending for Trump and Kamala, and black is where it's not. Rates of change, a very high R squared correlation of 0.9 in the actual election. What happens when I shuffle? Oh, look, the lockstep parallel motion went away. The correlation is expected. The expected correlation is essentially zero in a fair election.
Okay.
Am I shocked that this is the result? Absolutely not. The idea that Trump and Kamala voters can telepathically communicate their stance between every consecutive batch of 13,000 ballots, regardless of which precinct or congressional district they live in, is absolutely absurd. And this is why they're so afraid of our case in Nevada.
So the next thing we do is we run a million shuffles. And what we find is that we run a million shuffles, and that the lockstep motion from the original order never appears. So
In fact,
that's
because of those shuffles, we can calculate the chance of this actually happening in a fair election. And so the prefaces, there's something called the 5 sigma rule. So if you want to get a Nobel Prize in physics, you have to show that your model makes a prediction that is beyond 5 sigma of the currently accepted model. So 5 sigma means a 1 in 3.5 million chance. So if you want a Nobel Prize, you better be able to do something with such a high level of confidence that there's no way it's a fluke. So what happens if Roger does this? I mean, I do only 4,000 shuffles because I do it in Excel and it takes me days. But Roger can do a million shuffles in an hour because he uses an actual computer program. And what he does is he gets the mean and standard deviation of the expected correlation and he compares it against the actual election. And you get something like a 12, 13 sigma result.
which is
So,
which is the one we just did recently was 8 sigma, which is 1 in 2.1 quadrillion.
right. So 13 sigma is a 30-digit number. So it's 1 in something decillion. So the chance of this happening uh, under a fair permutation of the ballots is a number. So it's larger than the number of snowflakes that hit the earth every year, which is in the septillions. It just doesn't happen. All right. Do we want to talk about anything else before we go to Alaska?
I think that unless anybody has their hand raised, and I guess I have to kind of scroll through here to see if there's any raised hands.
So another thing I'd like to point out here is that we're not really doing math. We're just doing addition, subtraction, and and plotting it. We're just we take the Trump voters that voted yes and no, Kamala voters that voted yes and no, and we add them up through the election and plot them on a plot. And this
That's all
shows
we're doing. Addition and subtraction a little bit of division to get the percentage, like you see here. We have to divide by the total yes and no for each candidate. Okay. And then you just plot them against the ballot number. Okay. The ballot number here it's the percentage of ballots counted. So halfway through the count is half of 443,000, which is about 220. Okay. So we normalize this from 0 to 100.
This is doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with numbers. It's not mathematics, it's arithmetic.
That's right. You don't need to be an expert. You don't have to have a PhD to do this. You also don't have to have a PhD to shuffle the ballots within their own precincts. It's very easily replicated. Okay, in our court documents, I explicitly say in 4 different filings how this is replicated, and the AG's only defense is that my work is inscrutable. Even though it can be done by maybe somebody in 9th or 10th grade who's good at modding video games.
Okay, let's hit the Alaska now.
Okay. Well, hold on. One more thing. How does this happen? I think they need to know how it happens. Okay. Because the precinct preserved shuffle test gets rid of the hydra of demographics. You can't say it's, Jews, women, blacks, MAGA men, Latinos, evangelicals, Muslims, white collar vote. No, doesn't matter what it is. We kept the ballots in their precincts and the pattern went away. It's not demographics. That which every demographic does cannot be explained by demographics. Okay. So how does this happen? And I just want to show them the flip function. So what they do is if they get and we actually know the flip direction, which I'll explain in a moment. We know they flip them from no to yes. Okay. And what happens is they say, listen, if somebody voted yes, we're going to leave the ballot alone. Okay. And when I say yes or no on a ballot proposition, this is going to turn into Rotterman or Allegory Smith in Alaska. Okay. And what's going to happen here is I say, okay, well, if somebody voted no, we're going to flip a coin that's weighted. And if it's heads, we're going to flip it to a yes ballot. So at the beginning of the election, the chance to flip a no to a yes ballot is 30%, according to the Nevada data. And at the end of the election, the flip chance is about 60%. But they have this weird sinusoidal pattern that they add to this straight line. Okay. And then when you add them together, you get the actual flip function. So here's the ballot number to set of percentages. So let's say we're at ballot number 50,000 and it's a no ballot. Then there is a 13% chance they're going to flip it to a yes ballot. But if we're 90,000 ballots in, now it's a 53% chance. And if we're this many ballots in, 130, now there's only a 32% chance. However, although it seems like it's a very complex function, the area under this curve is the total percentage of ballots that will be flipped every time. So if you add a sinusoidal function to it, well, the area under a sine curve is 0. So adding this crazy noise actually has 0 overall effect on how many ballots are flipped, which means the number of ballots flipped is just the area under this straight line. So now what happens when you apply a function like that to the original election? Because the original election, as the shuffles will show, and any cast vote record prior to 2020 will show, they're just flat lines. The chance of a Trump or a Kamala voter to vote yes or no is the same throughout the entire election. The time at which their ballot is processed doesn't influence how they vote on a ballot proposition. Okay? Which means the overall yes to no ratio for both voters combined is also a flat line. The purple line is the Trump to Kamala ratio. Now that's important because if you flip no to yes ballots you can do that without tampering with the Trump to Kamala ratio, which is the purple line. Ready? We're going to apply our flip function. Notice how the purple line stays exactly where it is. But now for every no ballot that came in, I applied that flip function over here. And this is what pops out. And then what happens when that happens, okay, is you end up with lockstep parallel motion between Trump and Kamala voters. And now their rates of change are equal throughout the election. And now you get very high R squared 9995 correlations. We even know the flip goes from no to yes because if you divide the height of the red line by the height of the blue line at all moments in time, the proportion is always the same from here to the bottom. Whereas if you did the yes percentage, which is 1 minus red and 1 minus blue, you don't get a constant, you get a wavy line. So we could actually determine the direction of the flip based on the very fact that the proportion of the heights of red to blue to the bottom of the x-axis is the same throughout the entire election, no matter how strange and wavy it's behaving, instead of being a flat line like in a fair election. Okay, that's all I wanted to say on that.
So there is one other thing. If you go back, if you look at this, what he's got on the screen right now, you see the two curves are descending. They're not flat. In a normal election, not only would these curves not have bumps on them, they'd be flat from the once you get past like 50,000 votes, it settles into what the outcome's going to be in a real election, and these lines are flat. They bounce around in the beginning, and then they're flat. There's nothing to make them have a slope at all, except a manipulation by the machines or the software.
Hi.
You see? We see this all over the place, everywhere.
So the scientific explanation of that is called the inverse confidence bands, which are used in marketing all the time. So basically, it's like, if I make 100,000 widgets with a 10% failure rate and only 5% of the customers return them, you can know with almost absolute certainty how many returned widgets you're going to have. The same thing applies to elections. If you tell me that 80% of Trump voters are opposed, then there's something called an inverse binomial distribution band, okay, which says over the course of the count, I know I'm going to get a rapidly convergent region within this boundary. And over hundreds of thousands of ballots, it's very, very convergent, like this, okay? And these sigma confidence bands are the same ones we were talking about before, like 2, 3, or 4, or 5 sigma. So there's, 99.999% of the time within 5 sigma, this red line has to stay here. So if it's bouncing up and down, well, let's just say the overall share was here, and the confidence band tells you that it's supposed to be here, yet half of the election is completely outside of the 5 sigma confidence band. So you literally have mathematically impossible election results, assuming that the election was fair. So I don't argue about how people should have voted or what the end result should have been. I just argue about the sequence. Assume that the end state of the election is true for the sake of it being true, then the sequence of how it got there is impossible. I think I covered everything there is to cover in Nevada. I'm going to start closing these images.
Yeah. I was going to say, let's move into Alaska now.
Does anybody have questions I need to know before we go?
There was somebody who wanted to see an example of a fair election. I think maybe they weren't paying too close of attention, though, because you had it down there in that one quadrant.
Well, yeah, a fair election would just be flat lines.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to
We actually so rarely see a fair election that we
yeah,
have to,
it's exactly. It's hard.
We have to create one.
Oh, well, we do find them every now and then, or you'll find a ballot proposition that wasn't messed with. Like the other state questions in Nevada are flat lines, but it's just like it's hard to find a controversial issue or controversial race that hasn't been tampered with in a cast vote record. All right, Nevada, Alaska. Is my screen still present?
Mm-hmm. We can still see it.
Do you want to talk for a while I get the pictures together for that one? Just if anybody wants to talk.
Okay, so Alaska is a pretty small election. We've got 16,000 ballots. We have four separate races basically. Edward did a lot of work to with his Excel spreadsheets to find the combinations of candidates and the candidates to create the you know, like when we talk about Trump and yes, Trump and no, Kamala and yes, Kamala and no. Those we use those votes on a ballot to construct what's called disjoint sets. So those four combinations become a disjoint set that we can plot against each other. We can do these kinds of things with a disjoint set. In Alaska, we make up the disjoint sets with like Roderman and Olson, or Roderman and the other candidate. Okay, and so that, and because Roderman is the race that Roderman is in, he's unopposed. So we kind of use him as a standard candle. We use him like we use the ballot initiatives in the Nevada races and in Colorado. Colorado had 11 ballot issues in the 2020 election. And that shows up in Arapahoe County because they made a mistake. They didn't do the last step and smooth everything out afterwards. But ballot initiatives have been very handy when we're trying to form disjoint sets. And we've used them in Maryland and in Nevada, Colorado, Arizona to demonstrate these lockstep motion things. And as Edward was describing the sigma values, the standard stuff people do for statistics to find the sigma values. The sigma values can from a sigma value you can compute a probability. For example, if you have an 8 sigma result, the probability that can happen is 1 in 2 trillion, 1 in 2 quadrillion. When you get to sigma of 11, you're talking about one molecule in a hot tub. One molecule of water in a hot tub. You're talking about 10 to the 27. So even those computations are not mathematics. They're basically just doing some ratios on the values against a bell curve. And it's very straightforward. It's none of the stuff that we're doing with these lockstep motion analyses. None of it is actually it gets to being mathematics, because for something to be mathematics, it's got to be abstract. So algebra is abstract. We have a plus b equals c. When you're taking 3 plus 8 equals 11, that's arithmetic. Everything we're doing here is arithmetic. It's plus, minus, divide, multiply, and scaling and putting it out on a plot. It's just the volume of the data makes it seem very complicated, and the arrangements of the data make it seem complicated. But it's something that if we needed to have a special master in a lawsuit, we would probably, Edward and I would probably go look for a 10th grade math teacher. Okay, and if the judges have said, there's one judge in
Illinois.
In one of these cases that said, I went to law school because I was no good at math. The case is dismissed. And basically, the attorney should have been screaming, you need a high school teacher here to be a special master. You don't need a mathematician. Okay,
All right,
where
so
are you, Edward?
let's
Come
talk.
on.
I'm about to talk. I am. Oh, so we're going to look first at Hull versus Spencer, the school board race. Okay. So what we have here is the ballots are split not just by Hole and Spencer, but also how they voted for, if they voted for Roterman or if they did a write-in for Assembly Seat B. So instead of having yes or no on a ballot proposition, it's Roterman or not Roterman, which for all intents and purposes is probably Allegory Smith. Okay. And when we do this, we say, how did Hole and Spencer voters decide on Roterman versus not Roterman? We get lockstep parallel motion between Hole and Spencer voters and your cast vote record. In fact, it's stronger than the lockstep seen in Nevada. Yes, the R squared is lower, but the sigma is actually higher. It's like a 25 sigma thing. It's just retarded. So, and then if we look at Burnett versus Hewitt, the other school board race that the Democrat or liberal won there, same thing. Lockstep parallel motion. If we say what was their support for Roterman. And this creates a rather absurd scenario. Okay. First of all, let's see if this holds for McComas and versus Armstrong. And the answer is it doesn't. Okay. So if we look at that, we say if we split this into McComas versus Armstrong voters, do we get lockstep parallel motion? The answer is no. Does everybody see how that went away? Hello?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, so this is McComas versus Armstrong, and they were asking how do they vote on Roterman or Wright?
Mm-hmm.
The lockstep parallel motion vanishes. So I thought, well, I don't know, maybe it was fair. Maybe Olson really spoiled it. Who knows? But then I said, you know what? I've been studying these guys for a long time. They probably treated McComas and Olson like the same exact person because algorithms just put numbers together and they don't care. Okay. So instead of our four values being McComas for Roterman, Armstrong for Roterman, McComas not Roterman, and Armstrong not Roterman, we're going to import the same four. Okay. But now we're also going to say, but we're going to add Janine Olson's vote to John McComas's vote if they voted for Roterman. Okay. So now it's not Armstrong versus Roterman versus not Roterman. So how many not Armstrong voters preferred Roterman versus Allegory Smith? Well, that's the red line. How many Armstrong voters preferred Roterman versus Allegory Smith? Well, that's the blue line. So over here, if we don't factor in Olson, here, if we treat McComas and Olson like a super candidate, one person, we're back to lockstep parallel motion.
Interesting.
It gets worse. It gets worse than this. By the way, this was a triple digit sigma event. There's not even a word in the English language for what that means. Okay. Under the shuffle test. So now let's look at raw vote totals instead of percentages or ratios or whatever for the moment. Okay. Let's just look at that. So we have 12 different vote totals here. Okay. And this is Haney versus Roach. Amongst these vote totals, okay, which of these are significant? Let me see. Roterman, McComas, Haney. Okay. I'm just trying to say A1 is Roterman, McComas, Haney. Okay, so A1, which is this red line, okay, this is the number, so that the moving window here, so in Nevada it was 13,000 ballots because it was 500,000. Here we're only talking about 15,000 ballots in this election. So the moving window is only like 700 or 800 or something. So actually 686. Okay. So the red line is the number of ballots in any window that were voted for Rotterman, for McComas, and for Haney. That's the red line. The light blue line is so basically let's go back to the red line. This is like the straight Republican ticket. Rotterman, McComas, Haney. Okay. The blue line is the straight Democrat ticket. Allegory, Smith, Armstrong, Roach. Does anybody notice anything about the red line and the blue line?
Yeah, look at that. How about that?
Every other type of vote total is flat and inert. So, for instance, if we said not Rotterman, McComas, Haney, it's probably somewhere down here doing jack all. Okay. If we said Rotterman, Armstrong, Roach, it's down here somewhere doing jack all. The only things moving in this cast vote record is Rotterman, McComas, Haney, and not Rotterman, Armstrong, Roach. And it creates a situation. Okay?
And it's the same behavior.
Right. Okay, this is just raw vote totals. Okay. It creates a situation where Democrat support for Rotterman swings between 25 and 60%, depending on which precinct you're in. But I kid you not. And it's purely a function of Barbara Haney's vote, which I'm going to show you if I can find the picture. I was looking for it. Right. We're very close to the picture. It can't be too far away. Please, God, find me the picture. Somebody talk while I find the picture. Oh, I think I got it. It's going to come up soon. Yeah, it's up here. Okay, so here it is. Okay. This is Burnett versus Hewitt, but it's the same idea. Okay. Just let me save the Rotterman Democrat swing. Okay. So here we're looking at the end state of each precinct, and I'm going to show you that although these dots look messy, they actually have zero error in three-dimensional space. But let's do the two-dimensional version first. Okay. So the end states of the precincts, if we're looking at Burnett versus Hewitt voters, this is the same. You could place Burnett and Hewitt with Haney and Roach, or Hull and Spencer, or whoever. So depending on the overall performance for the conservative candidate, which is the purple line, Democrats swung from 25 to 65% in support of Rotterman. I'm only looking at the Hewitt voters there. And if we do McComas versus Armstrong, the swing is from 15 to 85. Okay. So apparently the performance of the conservative candidate dictates how the Democrat voters cast their ballots, their preference for Rotterman. So where does this spooky action at a distance come from? All this lockstep parallel motion and, Democrats, magically changing that they go from hating Rotterman to loving Rotterman, depending on how Barbara Haney does. So how does that happen? And I'm going to show you the actual mechanism. And this is not, this is a little high IQ, but it's called a manifold. Okay. So what happens is alpha, the x-axis here, is the total Republican performance. Okay. Omega is Rotterman's performance. And lambda is this weird ratio. It's if we look at this picture, so alpha is S over U, S plus U over all the votes. So that's Republican performance. Omega is S and T, okay, over all the votes, which is Rotterman's performance. Okay. S and V is this weird ratio. It's like mainline conservatism plus mainline Democrat divided by all the votes. So that's what lambda is on the y-axis, and they preset this manifold in 3D space across all the precincts in the county, and we see this since 2020. It's actually the rig is actually really, really dumb. So once you have this predetermined manifold installed on every tabulator, all of the ballots, no matter who they voted for and no matter where they come from, what precinct or congressional district, like in Nevada, they all do the exact same thing. They all become conformal to a 3D geometric paradigm. So you predetermine the Republican performance alpha, you predetermine Rotterman's performance omega, and then you predetermine the polarization ratio lambda. And what happens? Well, M and N, Rotterman's share amongst Burnett voters and Rotterman's share amongst Hewitt voters, are now forced geometrically with these formulas, which produces two parallel planes, red and blue. So now when alpha goes up, red goes up, and blue goes up. And then if you look at the actual election, I'm going to go zoom in so you can see that. Okay. Here's the actual data. The points are the data points from the actual election. And you can see that Rotterman's total share of the vote in green falls exactly on that green plane, like expected. Rotterman's support amongst conservatives in red is on that red manifold. And Democrat support goes up insane. See the curvature of that 3D manifold? And all the Democrat support for Rotterman is also constrained to that surface. This is all mathematically forcing. Red and blue cannot exist anywhere else. The moment you put green where it is, it's mathematically forcing. And this is what causes Democrats and Republicans to appear to be synchronized in these cast vote records. So when you see lockstep parallel motion, these uniform flip functions, okay? It's an artifact of the rig. It's an unintended consequence that they did not foresee that I caught. But the actual mechanism that does this kind of election rigging is a very dumb mechanism. It's just a manifold in 3D space. And that's my presentation right now, Barbara. I have to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
I'll be right back for questions. I swear to God, I can't hold it.
Okay, that's fine. So, Roger, did you want to talk a little bit more about the results? You're muted.
Yes. Okay, so what Edward was talking about is, again, it results from organizing things into these disjoint sets. So where this manifold, where he discovered this manifold thing was in Nevada in the 2020 and 2022 elections. And 2020, for instance, if you divide, we looked at the early and mail. Okay, so and we used Trump and early, Trump and mail, Biden early, Biden mail. That was his four set parts, the four things that form a set. So if you look at Trump over Trump mail over Trump mail plus Trump early, you have the ratio of Trump votes that are mail votes. Similar with Biden, if you take Biden mail over Biden mail plus Biden early, you have the percentage of Biden votes that are mail votes. But what happens if you take the Trump early over Trump early plus Biden mail? That's one of the ratios that's in this system. You can't name that. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, but it exists. Okay, so we have these two ratios that we have the Trump mail over Trump mail plus Biden early, and you have you have Biden early over Biden early plus Trump mail. And there's no way to describe these in words. We call them nameless and formless. And they together form that third ratio called lambda. And what they do is they set lambda. We call that one the demonic ratio because that's what they use to set the ratios, nameless and formless, and they make lambda from those two ratios, and they set that ratio. And what it does is it forces the situation, for instance, in 2020 in Nevada, that Trump's mail vote could not go above 35% until Biden's election, early vote went above 65%. So that they set the ratio that Trump can get, and they rigged the election that way.
So
And
Roger,
that's what
say
shows up on these manifolds. Okay.
so say you're an election judge and you're watching, this is not something you're going to observe with people in line voting, right?
No, it doesn't happen there.
Yeah, it happens. Where does it it happens in the algorithm in the machines,
Central
right?
counting.
Right.
Central counting. All the early and mail ballots wind up in the same room. Okay. And they're run through tabulators behind closed doors, away from anybody being able to observe. In Nevada, the law says that the ballot is the electronic one and zeros on a memory device. That's the ballot. The paper ballot that you sent in as a mail ballot is an accessory and meaningless. It's not the ballot. The ballot is the ones and zeros on the disk in the tabulator. And the other part of the law says that the votes are computed. They are not counted, they're computed. So basically, all the mail ballots and early ballots, the ones that got dropped into drop boxes or mailed in.
Well, we don't have drop boxes here, so that's not.
Well, I mean,
We have early voting
all the mail
stations.
ballots. Well, what's happening now is even election day ballots wind up in the same place and getting counted behind closed doors. Okay, so
Mhm.
there's a set of machines. There's a set of machines in a room somewhere, and all the ballots arrive there, and they put them through the machine. Those machines are. There may be 6 tabulators in that room. They're all wired together. They're not on the internet, but they are wired together. So
Well,
that's why you see that slope. The slope in the flip function is the slope starts out low, and as they're going through it, they adjust it so that they come out with the desired outcome. Okay, and that's why you see the wavy line and combined with the slope to produce the outcome they want. Now, if you look back at the 2020 elections, there were the 6 cities determined the election. It was Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Atlanta, and Las Vegas, and Phoenix. Okay, in all 6 of those states, the outcome of the election was just a little bit bigger than just a little bit bigger than the percentage that would require a automatic recount. So that's why you saw the stopping of counting for 2 hours, is while they were assessing what they needed to do, and then they ran the rig for days. In some cases, in Pennsylvania, for days, they ran the rig in Pennsylvania it's 0.25%. They ran the rig until they got 2.54%, and then they finished.
but in this case here that we have before us, then, or in any case, in any of these instances, what would be the policy question involved then?
What would be what?
Is there a constitutional issue or a
Yes,
policy
yes. The
question
constitutional
involved?
issue, the constitutional issue is that that what
Hold on, Roger, I have to interrupt. So Luna's asking, are you basing Democrat votes on party affiliation? The answer is no. I'm looking at how they voted in the cast vote record. So if you voted for Trump, then you're a Trump voter, and I consider you a Republican for that election. If you voted for Kamala, I consider you a Democrat for that election. So now
Well, in our
telling,
election,
oh, in your election, okay, so if you voted for Barbara Haney, I'm considering you to be a Republican for that election. If you voted for Patrick Roach, I'm considering you to be a Democrat for that election. So there's a very clear, the candidates are pretty straightforward, right? McComas versus Armstrong, right? Olson is weird. Then you have Haney versus Roach. Then you have Hull versus Spencer. And then you have Burnett versus Hewitt. Hewitt. Okay.
Mhm.
So I say Republican or Democrat for this race. It means I can see exactly how that ballot was voted. And then I can see exactly how they voted for Rotterman or if they wrote in for Allegory Smith on the same exact ballot.
Well,
That's what the
we
cast vote
can't see
record
who they
shows me.
vote. We can't see who they voted for in the write-in, but we assume write-in votes are primarily for Allegory Smith.
Yes, because the write-ins in the other races were essentially non-existent. So
we
the
we,
only
we what we do is we categorize it as Roterman or not Roterman.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really matter what was written in.
Right. And that's how I would expect it to be because there's no way you could see who the name was on the cast vote record.
No.
well, all I know, Luna, is that it says that people who voted for the quote Democrat candidates under that definition, their support for Rotterman swings from 25 to 75%, depending on how the conservative candidate performed in that precinct. That is absolutely asinine. Oh,
It's
and they
it's
and
telepathic.
and they do it in perfect lockstep, the same rate of change with the Republicans.
And that's the crazy part right there.
Okay, so back to what where we are with this is that no, we can't go back and undo the election. No, we can't go back and change anything. The basic issue is that is a little part of the Constitution is called Article 4, Section 4, Clause 1. It says that the United States shall guarantee the states a republican form of government. When our votes are not being clearly counted from our ballots, when things are being manipulated in the machines to produce forged outputs, forged cast vote records that produce the output that some, deep state organization has requested, we do not have a Republican form of government. The people that are running these elections are violating the Constitution because they are not guaranteeing us a Republican form of government. It's a fundamental constitutional question. This is what Andy Thompson's case in Nevada has at its core. And so basically, Edward and I have not been working towards trying to unwind elections and find out who voted for who the real winners are. We can't really do that. What we're proving is that they're algorithmically manipulated, and so no one has any
It's worse than
idea
that,
what.
Roger. They're
Hmm?
they're they're, they're synthetically engineered.
Yes, they're synthetically engineered. So that what they're certifying as our cast vote record really has no relationship to the way people cast their votes. We do not have a Republican form of government, and this is everywhere. This is every machine does this. The software on these machines does it. Don't say machines. Fox
This is
News Fox
software, right?
Fox News lost their lawsuit because they said many times they said the machines rigged the election. So Dominion Voting Systems sued them, and the basis of their victory in this lawsuit was we don't make machines.
So
So the machine.
Debbie, all I do is say, okay, I look at the cast vote record, Debbie, And I say, okay, now I'm going to shuffle the ballots within their precincts, and does this pattern persist? And the answer is no, just like in Nevada. So yes, your elections are rigged, and the Sigma standard is worse than Nevada, right? So like Nevada is 12 Sigma. This North Star Bureau election is sometimes 100, 200 Sigma. It's unbelievable.
Um, John Anderson's asking what system does Matsu use? They do hand counted. They do hand counted ballots.
Did you
And
So
guys hand count every single ballot in every single precinct for every single race?
no, this is Matsu. It's a different borough. And
Oh, okay.
and in Matsu, I do believe they do.
Okay.
okay, so in if they're doing the count also with some kind of machine and software, that software is clean. And the software is clean because they know they can't get away with cheating on a hand count.
Yeah, like make no mistake, Dominion can fairly count an election. In fact, they have to know the original state of the election before they rig it to minimize the number of ballots that they change. Like
Has there
in order to execute a flip function, you have to know what the original ballots are before you flip them.
right, right. Okay. Is there anything else we need to? I guess I'll open it up for discussion. If anybody wants to ask questions,
So
raise your
about
hand.
which precincts were hand counted again in North Star
Um,
Bureau?
the early vote was hand counted, but just in one race, and that was Audra Hall's.
There was
And
nothing
then,
wrong. There was nothing wrong with the early vote in this election.
and then in Moose Creek precinct, and one of the Goldstream precincts, um, there was a hand count of uh there was a hand count let's see, Moose Creek and Goldstream, and I think they did the Rotterman race.
They didn't hand count any of the actual partisan races that were actually contested.
No.
Yeah, well, that's why Rodman's race is a standard candle.
Yeah.
So when you see all this stuff moving up and down in lockstep parallel motion for Rodman and Allegory Smith, believe it or not, the Rodman and Allegory Smith ballots are probably real. What's happening is that they're flipping Republican to Democrat or Democrat to Republican in the other races without changing how they voted for Rodman or Allegory Smith. And that's what causes both parties to do the same thing at the same time in every precinct. So I'm not shocked that they didn't count the actual contested races in those hand audits, because that would have revealed the fraud immediately.
Okay. Anybody else?
Also, how long after do they do it? Because unless they like you got a hand count like pretty much the next day.
And I don't know
Otherwise,
that
they'll
I
just
don't
make
think
up
it
the
was
paper trail.
yeah, I don't know if it was the next day or not. That I don't know. It was pretty soon after, but not likely the next day. But that's something maybe one of the election judges would know. The clerk's office definitely would know.
Anyway, at
For
the end of the
instance.
day, guys, it's sort of like when they say, well, our risk limiting audits prove that Colorado and Nevada had fair elections. Can anybody look at this picture? I'm going to share my screen again. Would anybody feel if the Nevada Secretary of State came out, which he did say in the court, that we have hand count, we have risk limiting audits, therefore this can happen in a safe and secure election? Would anybody believe them?
No.
Okay, but that's 500,000 ballots right there. Maricopa is 2 million ballots that does that in 2020. If you look at that, where's that beauty? I'll find it real quick. Here's Maricopa. This is how Trump and Biden voters in 2020 voted on a tax proposition for 2 million ballots. So the moving window here is about 30,000 ballots. If I shuffle that,
Mhm.
if I shuffle it, that goes away. Okay, and remember, I only shuffle within their own precincts. So people can talk about audits, this, that, the physical who, what, when, where, why, and how. I don't care. I know that it's mathematically impossible. The election is rigged. End of story. You can't tell me that this happens in a fair election. That's impossible.
Okay, so what I say about the risk limiting audits, they limit the risk that the people who are doing this are going to get caught. That's what
I
the risk
mean, I
limiting.
mean, let's think about what a risk limiting audit actually is in most states. From what they all seem to have the same procedure. They only pick, I think in Merrick, and like in Clark County, they only pick 700 ballots out of a million, 1.1 million, 700 ballots. Not even that. Maybe it was like 600. They only pick 600 ballots, and then they only check them for one race out of all the races down the ballot. The Secretary of State chooses which race will be picked. And then you would think that when the humans get the paper ballots in their hand, that they can then compare it to the cast vote record, right? Well, here's the thing. That's only if it's a mail-in ballot do they get to look at the paper. In Nevada, there's only, for election day and early voting, there's only touch screens. So you get a VPAT, and a VPAT is printed out by a machine. Then when they put what the voter marked on the ballot into the quote software that compares to the cast vote record, the software determines whether it's right or wrong, not the human volunteer that's putting the things into the software to check the cast vote record. So it's just another black box confirming another black box.
Right.
For example, here the Maricopa audit.
Oh, well, one more thing. See what Vicky said. It's not D or R. It's against all of us. Guys, look at this Nevada election. Both Trump and Kamala voters got fucked in
Exactly.
this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kamala
And
voters started at 55% against it, and they ended up at 30% against it, guys.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and where we've seen a lot of this is in these. There have been abortion issues all over the place.
Oh yeah, check out this one. Here's
Every
abortion.
single abortion issue has been manipulated
So
to.
here is, and yeah, I'm pretty much on the left on most issues except abortion and gun rights. Okay. Hanny and I argued on the phone about, healthcare and stuff and whatever. But the point is, when it comes to abortion, I am very pro-life and I'm very pro-gun. Okay, those are the two definite conservative stances I have. So now here's abortion in Nevada again, and let me bring this picture out real quick so I can just have it in paint. And you're going to see Trump voters and Trump voters only.
We don't
Craig.
see it yet.
Okay. We're only looking at early and election day. We're not even talking about mail-in right now. This is the 2024 general election. It gets worse in the mail. And we see that in both Clark and Washoe counties that have hundreds of
Wait a
thousands
minute.
of
We don't
ballots.
see it yet. We don't see it yet. You didn't share screen.
Oh, oh,
That would help.
okay.
There we go.
Now, here we're going to get lockstep parallel motion on a grand scale between two counties. Okay. So here we see that Trump voters on abortion, this is the early vote of Clark County. Trump voters were 70% opposed. And in the early vote of Washoe County, they were also 70% opposed. In fact, they were 70.00% opposed in both counties. Then on election day, Trump voters and Trump voters only fell to 52.00% opposed in both counties. So a 70% ratio is a 3-to-1 ratio. A 52% ratio is essentially 1-to-1. How did Trump voter opposition to abortion crash by a factor of 3 in both counties from early to election day?
Yeah, I can't explain that.
That's impossible. Meanwhile, Kamala voters magically double their opposition in both counties. But if you put on a 3D manifold, then I can explain why that happened for both of them. It was rigged. Okay.
Hmm.
So is it only Nevada this happened in? No, here is Maryland down here. Okay. If I zoom in, we see that Trump voters go from 75% in the early vote and the first mail-in vote. Okay. So let me get this picture in here. This is Maryland 2024.
Maryland had two sections of early and two sections of election day that came in groups and different times.
But Maryland is the most rigged state I've seen yet, by the way, guys. So Alaska, you're nowhere near as bad as them yet. Okay. But you're definitely getting there. Um, so here is Alaska. Okay, so first we're going to look at Hogan voters because they were never Trumpers. Hogan was a Republican, either governor or senator, I forgot. So Hogan voters go from 63% against abortion in the first mail-in vote and the early vote. Then they drop, so 63% is 2-1. They drop to 50%, which is 1-1. That's a twofold decrease in opposition amongst Hogan voters to abortion. Then they drop to 33% in the second mail-in vote. So you have first mail-in and early vote, 2-1 opposed to abortion. Election day vote, 1-1 opposed. Second mail-in vote, 37% opposed. Kamala voters, they just sit here at 5% opposed to late-term abortion the entire election. Okay? Third trimester abortion. How about Trump voters? Okay. Well, Trump voters go from 75% opposed to 60% opposed. That's another twofold decrease. To 48% opposed, another twofold decrease in opposition ratio. This is 2024. So I have Nevada and I have Maryland doing the exact same thing. And this is just one county of Maryland. You get this in every single county in all of Maryland.
And one thing interesting about Maryland is it's ES&S machines. It's not Dominion machines.
And here's one thing I know because I'm my family's mostly Democrats. I'm in New York. I know very few Democrats in real life that support third trimester abortions. In fact, the Pew, the Gallup polls, all this, even the mainstream media polls put Democrats at about 40% when it comes to third trimester abortions. So I don't believe that my fellow countrymen are 95% in favor of murdering babies in the third trimester. But beside that, because we don't argue how it should be, we just argue about sequences. Getting threefold declines in oppositions in every county in two states on opposite sides of the country, Nevada and Maryland. You get this in Colorado as well. Okay. Um, we probably got it in Maricopa in 2024, but they still won't give us their cast vote record. I wonder why. Okay. And this is what we see. We just see, I call it transcontinental lockstep parallel motion. Trump voters of all kinds, of all races and ethnicities and socioeconomic status across the country decrease their stance to late-term abortion threefold over the course of the 2024 general election.
And it's not just across the country, it's across voting machine vendors. They're running the same software.
Right. Everything I just showed you is Dominion, except for Maryland, which is ES&S, but Dominion and ES&S, their common origin is Smartmatic.
Right. So the constitutional question then becomes the constitutional guarantee, the policy prescription.
Luna, the answer is no. We cannot trust the result of the 2024 general election. The very first thing I said in a Nevada court case is that the Trump's electors need to be withdrawn. That's what I said. That's one of my opening statements.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Well, I wanted to tell about these audits, these risk limiting audits. In the Maricopa audit that happened in 2021 after the 2020 election, They did this thing in a hockey rink. They brought all the ballots over. There were 1,600 and something ballot boxes of ballots, and all the boxes, which are supposed to be sealed after they've been tabulated with their records and a memory stick, usually the box had 6 or 7 batches of 200 per box. So all these boxes came over. All of them had been opened, and the ballots had been shuffled. The batch documents were separated from the batches and in the bottom of the box, except for the 50 boxes that were for the risk limiting audit. They were sealed. So these risk limiting audits are staged. The ballots that they use for the risk limiting audits are chosen and organized to pass the risk limiting audit. That's why I say the risk limiting audit totally limits to zero the risk that they're going to get caught cheating in these elections. That's what they're for.
So, I guess
What can we do?
Nash- Ellie-
What can people in your area do? There's not
right.
much you can do in Alaska, but you can actually Edward can probably tell you you can support the people who are putting forward these cases. We are hoping to be able to testify in front of a jury in one or more of these cases, and we're pretty certain that once we get in front of a jury, the issue is, are the elections rigged? We prove the elections are rigged. If a jury agrees that the elections are rigged, now we've got a jury trial decision that where we've proven the elections are rigged in a court. So Joe Altman is fighting a lawsuit against Eric Coomer, who was the guy from Dominion Voting Systems. It's a libel case. Eric Coomer has sued him, saying that when Joe said that the elections are rigged, he was liable, he was defaming Eric Coomer. So the whole case relies on, if Joe Altman is correct, if Joe Altman is telling the truth, then he wins this case. He could use some support there. Tina Peters could use some support in her legal expenses for her getting out of prison so that she can actually spread the word about how Colorado elections were rigged. We've done a deep
But I mean,
analysis of that.
outside of all this stuff, this is all very interesting. But what can we do here locally about our own election?
Well, here's the problem is that your state legislators who are illegitimately elected are the ones that would have to change this. Are they going to change anything? No. This is the problem.
Well,
This is the
but aren't
article.
now an interesting feature of Alaska is that our boroughs run their own elections. So that's
That who runs
what
it? Can you repeat that, please?
our borough runs their own borough elections.
But the legislature determines the time, manner, and places, so that they're the ones who put.
Actually, not for the boroughs.
So you can okay, you need to get your borough managers to stop using machines,
Okay,
and you
Mark,
need to get the borough managers to stop using mail ballots. Need to get the borough managers to require real ID to be issued a ballot on one day in elections.
Mark Cook has a question.
Hello, all. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Mark, after you're
Yeah.
done, I'm going to show them how Arapaho changed their cast vote record to get rid of lockstep parallel motion.
Okay, no problem. So yeah, I mean, basically what we've got is we know they're rigged. There's no question about that, but not enough people know they're rigged. And in addition to that, we have to be realistic. I don't see us getting rid of all these electronic voting systems before the upcoming election, unless someone makes a really bold move, and maybe we'll get there. So what I would recommend is we have to plan for having to run elections on these same systems. And the question is, how do we beat them? How do we stop them? How do we expose them? Hold on one sec. So there are ways we can do that. We can do it with exit polling. You can do it with a hybridized system like we did in Searcy County, Arkansas, where they still ran them through the machines because it was required by law. But they said, all right, right after we run them through the machines, we are going to hand count all these ballots. So if everyone hand counts the ballots no matter what, then they can't screw with the machines because then the results will absolutely be different. And that worked really well. We did the primary and we did it in the general election in Searcy County. So I'm happy to work with you guys if you want to do some strategizing on what you guys can do in the different boroughs there and within the law, and what type of open data bills we need to get out there in order to make it really difficult for them to cheat without getting caught, because I'd rather deter them from cheating in the first place than try to deal with catching them or dealing with it after the fact. So I'm available. I'm happy to spend all the time necessary. I don't want to take Ed's time, but you got my phone number there. Contact me and we can sit down and do a little work group session and put our heads together on how to set you guys up best for the fairest possible
And on
election.
this, somebody asked a related question to Mark, RWM. He says, no, we've shown what's being done. Can you trace who is doing the manipulating? So this is how I answer this question. If when school segregation was ruled unconstitutional, did that require people to be arrested and prosecuted for segregating schools? RWM?
No.
Okay, so the Constitution does not require criminal convictions to be enforced. So the guarantee clause is being violated. So showing what's being done is sufficient for me. When we can
Yeah,
only
I'm not.
we can only do that through civil cases because I'm not an attorney general or district attorney. I'm not a sheriff, so I can't indict people. I can't arrest people, and I can't start criminal dockets. I wish I could, but I can't. But I don't need
Yeah,
to because I have the
I don't
guarantee
think any of
clause.
us are really, but I think citizens can move forward on things in an effective manner. Mark, I don't have your phone number, but you probably have mine. So if you can shoot me a text, that would be pretty cool. Aldine wants to know why we can't go to a grand jury. And the question is the grand jury really requires a prosecutory referral. Um,
Exactly.
and
Right.
I don't have that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't.
we have a Republican president Trump who has no idea how the elections are actually being rigged. It's very sad.
Well, I think he's starting to wake up to that.
Yeah, well, it's taking a little too long for him to wake up.
Yeah.
The there is a sheriff in Michigan that tried to get a grand jury and tried to fix this, and he's been run through the ringer. And like what happened to Tina Peters. I mean, anybody who does anything that threatens the power structure that they maintain with the software in these machines is put through the ringer, and like Tina, some of them have wound up in prison. Many have wound up being prosecuted. Many of the alternate electors from the 2020 election were prosecuted. They waited until just before the 2024 election to do it, to have the maximum intimidation against anybody who would challenge anything. So, this we're in a tough spot. It's going to take a big change.
Yeah.
I've heard some rumblings that Tulsi Gabbard is going to produce a national security emergency finding, and that Trump is going to declare a national state of emergency, a national security state of emergency on elections, which will allow him to order that the election be held in one day with ID required and paper ballots and citizenship proof. etc. And I'm waiting for that to happen.
Well, I'll believe it when it happens, Roger. Until then, I'm
Exactly.
not holding my breath.
I'm not holding my breath either, but
right.
I've
You know, it's just,
I've heard it.
right.
I've heard it from 2 or 3 different sources.
Right. Okay,
Okay.
so
Let's show Arapahoe real quick. I want everybody to see this. So this was one of our first exhibits in the Nevada court case, and Arapahoe County is in Colorado. Okay. And it was the most overt case of lockstep parallel motion ever seen, because if we zoom in on the picture, which I'm going to have to zoom in really hard, okay, what you'll see is that Trump and Biden voters, this was the repeal of Gallagher, which, if passed, would triple everybody's property taxes, and it did pass somehow.
wait a minute. We don't see your screen yet. Hold
Oh.
on.
Okay, hold on. So this was alongside the Nevada exhibit, as you saw, with lockstep parallel motion. The second main exhibit was Arapahoe County in Colorado that went into the Nevada courts, also by Dominion. And we see here in red and blue the original percentages of Trump and Biden voters, how they were opposed to the repeal of Gallagher. Okay. So that's red and blue, old Trump, old Biden. This is the 2020 general election. We filed in the end of November in 2024 in Nevada on this 2020 cast vote record from Colorado and this 2024 cast vote record from Clark County. In April of 2025, without notifying the court or the plaintiff, Andy Thompson, Arapahoe County changed its cast vote record from 2020, half a decade later. And now you'll see the yellow and green lines, which are the new values for how Trump and Biden voters voted on this proposition, are no longer in lockstep parallel motion, and the rates of change have no correlation. They tampered with evidence across state lines in the middle of a court case without notifying the court or the plaintiff. And then when I caught them, it became a national hullabaloo, if you guys saw that. They said, oh, we had a redaction error in the original cast vote record. So if you wanted any more proof that lockstep parallel motion can't happen in a fair election, here it is for you.
And Gallagher was a case of a property tax hike. Is that correct?
It was property
Taxes.
tax. Yeah. Mark knows
Yeah.
more about it than
I went farther. Edward based everything on Gallagher. There were actually 11 ballot propositions in that election. All of them showed complete total lockstep motion with R squares like 0.8, 0.9 in all 11 of those against Trump and Biden. And all of them had that removed by in the changed cast vote record.
And the only reason the guys they bothered to even change it was because it would have how stupid obvious it was. If you went to any other county in Colorado, there was like a 30 to 40% difference between Trump and Kamala voters. But in the original Arapahoe cast vote record, there was zero. Red and blue. It's not just their rates of change that are the same. The actual value is the same at every moment in time. There was no difference between Trump and Biden voters. Whereas in every other county, there was like a 30 to 40% difference.
And that was true. That was true on all 11 ballot issues.
Yes. So they really rigged the hell out of that one. And then, they knew that was going to court, and they decided they would rather tamper with evidence across state lines than have to defend the original cast vote record when we finally go to trial this January, almost a year after filing.
I call changing the cast vote record a confession.
Okay. All right. Well, there are no other questions. I know there's a lot of information here, a lot to think about. Yeah, if anybody hasn't seen that, Mark, absolutely. That is that video that Patrick Byrne dropped yesterday showing John Brennan was the partner in Dominion was very illuminating. that was a very big deal. If anybody hasn't seen it, I would recommend seeing it. Aaron is asking who is Gaga of Kekistan.
That's my stage name. I'm Roger Fuller.
Okay. All right. Well, before we leave, Harmony Tomaszewski asked me to announce the Leadership Institute. So there's a Leadership Institute that's being held January 11th. January 10th, of course, is the big fundraiser out in North Pole for those who are interested. The fundraiser is not for this; it's for the Republicans. But so I've done my due diligence in doing my announcements. All right. Anyway, Libby's got a question. I'm going to ask her to unmute and ask her question. Okay, Libby.
Sorry, that was just a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. All right.
So what I would say before we go is lockstep parallel motion doesn't confer belief that there's something wrong with the election. It confers knowledge that the elections are synthetically engineered.
Right.
That's why they're scared to death of this Nevada court case. And if you can find 10 volunteer citizens in Alaska, they'll be scared to death of yours as well.
So that's the key, is to find the 10 volunteers. Vicky's got a question as well. I'm going to ask her to unmute. Trying to unmute you, Vicky. Might be easier just to type your question.
Barbara, you have the Word document of this, right?
I do, and if anybody is interested in seeing that, they can email me at barbarahaney100@gmail.com. Okay, Vicky, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Mark posted just up above there that his video is different than the one you spoke of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I did. The one that I thought he had the one on BitChute that is circulating.
He said he dropped dropped this on Dominion yesterday, a big bombshell, important for everyone. So maybe you can snap a photo of this and go to this website. Do you see it?
I see it. I'm waiting for it to open. It looks like it's on Twitter or X.
Yeah, it looks like X.
Yeah, it's an hour long. I'm not gonna try to do that here. That's
Yeah,
something.
no, I'm just telling people if they want to see it. He was telling us that. There he is.
Yeah.
There's one on, he's got another one listed here too.
Okay. Now I got to try to figure out how to get back to the meeting. So there we go. All right. Well, I will take a look at that later. And I will put my email address again down in the chat box. If anybody wants a copy of the paper, of Ed's paper, they can email me. And I suggest you put down in your email requests for paper, because other requests for Ed's analysis or something like that, I get tons of email every day. And so it would be helpful if I see that in the request line, so I can know how to respond to it quickly and accurately. And other than that, I will post the video of this once it's all scrolled up and ready to roll. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for having this.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you too, gentlemen, for your work on this. You guys did yeoman's work on it. And I very much appreciate your efforts to no end, because I know that there have been a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of work, a lot of analysis went into this, and I appreciate that very much.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay, with that, I will shut it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Mark. Thank you,
Thank
everybody, for asking
Thank
questions.
you, Edward.